Hello, how are you today?
I am great, thank you.
Yeah, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
About myself, okay. My name is Darren Gopal, and I'm married. I've been married for 19 years to your mother. I have two wonderful daughters, ages 16 and 12.
And a son.
And a son. Toby once is applying for the position, but we'll see. Toby once is applying for the position, but we'll see. Yes, I'm a radiation oncologist here in Kitchener, and I specialize in treating cancers of the prostate.
That's great. So I wanted to ask you, you grew up in Trinidad, so can you tell me a little bit about your childhood in Trinidad and maybe how it was different from us, me and Angela growing up here in Canada?
Okay, sure. I was the third of three. I was the third of four boys, and growing up in Trinidad was fun, is what I could say. At that time, our area was very safe, and we had free range of the neighborhood. Traffic wasn't a big thing back then, so at a young age I can get on my bike and I can ride around the neighborhood. I remember this one time I left with my friends and we went riding up a hill at the back of our neighborhood, and it was such a nice breezy day. We ended up spending all day out there until some older kids came and tried to steal our bikes from us, but we managed to get away from them. But then by the time I got home, it was closer to sunset, and that was the only time I remembered my parents getting upset that I was gone for so long and they didn't know where I was.
Wow.
But other than that, you can get on your bike, you kind of left your house, go play, and then kind of head back home in time for dinner.
So you have three brothers. Were you guys close growing up? Did you spend a lot of time with them?
Yes and no. We were close growing up. We did spend a lot of time together, but we each had our own sets of friends. So I don't know if we didn't really hang out together. We were close because we lived in the same house and we did the same things as family, but then we had our separate groups of friends.
Right. Were there any brothers that you were particularly closer to, or were they all kind of the same for you?
I was probably closest to your Uncle Bisham, who was the youngest one. My two older brothers were closer in age, and then there was a bit of a gap, and then I came along, so they were already in high school when I was in primary school and kind of doing their own thing, so probably Uncle Bisham.
2 years apart, or 3 years?
That's a good question.
Were you ever in high school together at the same time?
Yes, we were.
Yeah, what high school was that?
So I went to Naparima Boys College. Some pictures here I can show you. The one thing I remember is that we all wore uniforms, crispy white shirt, gray slacks, and a blue and white striped tie that we would wear every Monday, which was no easy feat in 32-degree weather.
Right.
And I said boys' college, but you notice that in the picture we had at the end of my high school, the principal actually wanted his daughter to come to our school, so he changed the rules and they admitted 6 girls into the Form 6, or the upper level, which would be the equivalent of your grade 12. And that was the first time that in decades that girls were part of Naparima Boys College.
Right. That's very cool. So these pictures, they're from your last day of school.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I guess we didn't have phones back then, but I did get one of those 110 cameras, took it to school on the last day, and One's missing.
Which one is missing?
The one with the car.
Oh, the car.
Oh, here we go. So yeah, not much schooling goes on the last day of school. We were just kind of hanging out in the hallways. As you can see, everything's open. The hallways are open, and we got the classrooms are made of these bricks with holes in them, that the just kind of let airflow going through and through.
Because of how hot it was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's us walking out. And luckily, if somebody has a car, we head on down to the local mall. And that's kind of some of my friends hanging out at the bowling alley.
Mm.
And then after that, you find an empty lot, play some soccer till it gets dark.
What was your favorite position as a soccer player when you were a kid?
So we didn't really have positions like you guys do here in Canada. So we didn't have a goalkeeper. We play a game called small goal, and we didn't really have a goal post. We play a game called small goal. It's just the goal itself is just about 1.5 feet wide, so there's no goalkeeper, and you don't really play positions. You just everyone's always moving around in constant flux, covering each other, and basically wherever you see an opening, you kind of fill that opening. I mean, I know in hockey you have positions, but I think of it more like a hockey game, but with a soccer ball.
Interesting. So that was your final day of high school. Did you guys have any like prom or any like graduation?
Yeah, then this is the night of grad, which is the equivalent of your prom.
That's very nice. Okay, that's great. So after high school, you have to go to university now. Where did you go to university?
Yeah, I was 19 and I decided to come away to Canada. I started off at McMaster for my undergraduate degree. I did 2 years of biology and psychology, and then I got into med school after the second year. So as it turns out, if you're in a 3-year degree and you get in after 2 years, you can defer your medical school admission for 1 year. But because I was in a 4-year degree, I kind of had to make a decision, give up my medical school position, finish my degree and reapply, or forget my degree and head off to med school, which is what I chose to do.
Interesting. So you can go to med school without a bachelor's degree?
Back then you could. My year was the last year that they would accept you after 2 years of university.
Wow.
Nowadays, most people need a bachelor's or sometimes even a master's to apply.
So you didn't have to take your master's at all?
No.
Wow.
No.
Wow.
That's something that's changed over the years, I know.
Yeah, now there's a lot of schooling involved. So how many, I know it's 11 years now, but how many years of university did you do in total then?
So 2 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, 5 years of residency, and 1 year of fellowship.
13 years.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I think it's 11 years then plus the residency. So that's like wow, it's a lot of schooling to be a doctor. I mean, I guess that must be something that you have to know you want to do from a really young age. Did you know what you wanted to do from when you were little?
I did not. I thought I wanted to be a high school teacher, actually. I wanted to teach high school physics.
Wow.
But then when I came to McMaster, I kind of fell into the wrong cloud. When I came to McMaster, I fell into the wrong crowd, and everyone wanted to do medicine, so I kind of went along.
Interesting. So why radiation oncology? Is that just like what stood out to you the most?
Yeah, exactly. So when I got into medical school, I told you before I really liked physics, and it seemed to have the best blend of medicine and physics all in one package. So that's why I ended up picking that one.
Okay, so what is one thing that you think you would have changed about your first few years in Canada, going to university?
That I would change.
Yeah.
I don't think I would change anything really.
Everything went just like how you planned it?
Yeah, I mean it was difficult, but it was a difficult adjustment, and certainly there were good times and there were bad times, but I don't know if there was anything I would really change.
There's nothing like you think you would have done differently if you went back?
I don't think so.
That's nice to think. What do you think was your biggest culture shock what do you think was your biggest culture shock from living in Canada? From living in Trinidad to moving to Canada?
I think the weather for sure. In Trinidad, it's warm all year round. The temperature varies more between daytime and nighttime than it does between January and the middle of July. We only have 2 seasons, the rainy season and the dry season, and even so, they are not much different. So, coming into Canada at the end of August, it was great. But then as things started cooling down and the leaves started dropping and fall came into play, I was like, wow, this is amazing. It was so beautiful. But then right after fall, things kept getting cooler and cooler, and it was quite a shock. I don't know if coming from a warmer climate, my clothes wasn't exactly right. I had to get new clothing. I didn't know how to dress warmly, and I still remember that that night I was waiting, after we were studying late, and then I had to catch the bus home, and it was cold out, and my jacket wasn't quite thick enough because you have no idea what to wear. So I bought a really fancy leather jacket, just like Fonzie had on Happy Days. And it just wasn't warm enough. And I'm waiting at the bus stop, and the bus was late. So I crossed the street to the payphone to call the number, and it would tell you what time the bus would get there. And as I crossed the street to use the payphone, I saw the bus fly by. So I called a number, and the next bus would be another 40 minutes away. And that was the first time I cried in Canada.
Oh, oof. Yeah. Canada winters can be pretty crazy. What do you miss the most about Trinidad?
What do I miss about Trinidad? Well, the weather for sure. It's nice having beautiful weather all year round. Sometimes it gets really hot, I know, but when you find a nice day where it's kind of cloudy and the breeze is blowing and you're outside, it's unbeatable. I miss my family. I'm lucky that my parents are still alive, and my extended family being around. Yeah, my friends.
Who do you think was, growing up, who do you think your closest friends were?
My closest friends in high school?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When some of my friends from primary school, we went to the same high school together. There's this one guy who has the same name as me, Darren Gopal.
Spelled the same?
It's spelled differently. He has 2 R's, E-N. We met in primary school, and we stayed being friends throughout high school, and we're still very good friends. Rene Sipasadze, also from high school. Yeah, so we were a close-knit group. And then interestingly, I think I joined a scout troop quite early on and developed a quite close-knit bunch of friends through the scout troop. And then, I don't know how, but met some of the guys. School was quite segregated into the science classes and the business classes, but met some friends on the business class, and we became quite close as well. So yeah, different groups of friends. It was kind of nice.
Do you still talk to any of them now? Would you say?
Yep. I still keep in contact with a couple of my friends from primary school who we went to high school together. Few people we reconnected with and Facebook came around, but still the distance with most people still being in Trinidad and me being up here and so busy, it's probably not as much as I'd like.
Okay. So I realized that after university, you moved back to Trinidad for a little bit. What happened there? Like, did anything interesting happen?
Well, I was hoping to talk a little bit more about the university.
University. Oh, for sure.
We're talking about challenges, and the other thing I remember is the language. Now, remember, in Trinidad, we speak English. We learn English in school. We speak it every day. English is our first language. And then it was about 6 or 8 months into being in Canada when I realized that I had an accent. Mm-hmm. And it was really becoming an issue that most people weren't understanding what I was saying at all. So learning to kind of slow down a little bit and temper that accent was a big challenge. Food. So back then, in Trinidad, we kind of grew up not eating any red meat. Mm-hmm. So we ate lots of chicken in Trinidad. We even had chicken burgers and chicken hot dogs. And then when I came to Canada, and I got the meal plan, I realized that there was a lot of red meat in Canada and not a lot of vegetarian options either back then. In fact, when you went to McDonald's, if you went to McDonald's, there was no chicken sandwich back then. At all?
Wow, was it chicken nuggets?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Remind me to look that up.
I
will. Culturally, Trinidadians are known, they're known to be jokers. They're always joking around. They don't take anything seriously. Always off to a party here or a party there. And coming to Canada, I realized, especially in university, people were a bit more serious. Mm-hmm. And they had specific times that they would joke around, and other times they would be serious. And I had to learn to adjust here a little bit, because Trinidadians are always joking. Everything's a joke. Nothing's taken seriously. So that was a bit of a challenge. Not knowing how to dress for the weather. When you land, you get off the plane and you walk out. When you start university, nobody sits you down and tells you this is how you have to dress. You have to get an inner layer and an outer layer and get a nice winter jacket. And you have no idea, because I remember it was coming to the end of October, and I was talking to a friend and thinking to myself, I have to get snowshoes. Winter is coming.
Is that a Game of Thrones reference? Is that a Game of Thrones reference?
No.
I haven't even seen... Haven't you seen Game of Thrones and I haven't?
I have,
Yeah.
but
Winter is coming. That's a Game of Thrones reference.
okay. I just didn't realize they wore snowshoes.
Okay. Okay, so now, after university,
Before that, I have another story to tell you about how difficult times can be sometimes. I rented an apartment upstairs at tanning salon, and the guy who was renting the tanning salon, he was kind of my main point of contact for renting the apartment, but he was also renting from the landlord. And he was responsible for paying the electricity bills. And the tanning salon at that time wasn't going too great, so he didn't pay the utility bills. So it was the middle of November when things were kind of starting to get really cold, and the heat shut off. And there was no electricity, no heat for a few nights there, and it was quite tough.
living as a college student with not a lot of money, or I guess university student, we can't say that. Okay, is that all from university that you would like to tell me about?
You asked about my biggest struggle in that first year of university, and I'd have to say the biggest struggle would be the long weekends, because most people who go to McMaster come in from other cities, and in the long weekends everybody clears out and goes back home, and the campus becomes the quietest place ever. And it could be those long 3-day weekends became even longer when you're the only one walking around campus.
Okay, so post-graduation out of university, what was your life like? Where were you headed?
Right, so when I left Trinidad, the plan was to go away, study, and and come back home. There was a plan to open a new cancer center. So after 13 years, the hope was that cancer center would be open and I would move back home and work there. As it turns out, when I got back home, that the new government cancer center, the NOC, the National Oncology Center, actually hadn't even started construction yet. So I went to the older cancer clinic that was out in St. James. Never been there before, not sure what to expect. And what I found was that they had these two machines from the 1960s, two Canadian-made cobalt machines from the 1960s that they had somehow managed to keep operational. This was all foreign to the way I was trained, but still I was excited to kind of start working and working to update the equipment there and to bring the new techniques into the country. But the folks who were running the center didn't have any plans on changing things or hiring new people. So it became obvious after the first couple of meetings that I was not going to be able to work for the government. Then I was approached by a doctor who had a private clinic, who wanted to open a private oncology clinic. And when he was running through the business plan, I realized that this is just too foreign to me, being trained in Canada and kind of working as a non-for-profit national healthcare system, that this for-profit model would be something very foreign to me. So at that point, I kind of started panicking a little bit that I might not be able to practice radiation oncology in Trinidad. So I started looking around at Canadian jobs, and luckily found in Windsor, they had posted for 2 radiation oncologists 3 years in a row and couldn't get a local candidate to fill the position. So I applied and I got it.
So, that year in Trinidad, did anything else interesting happen?
Right. So once I got the position in Windsor, now starts the process to get a work permit for me to come back to be able to actually work in Windsor. But of course, now that I knew I had a job that would eventually, I'll have the paperwork to start working. I could relax a little bit. And that was when I met your mother.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about your guy, like how you maybe first met or how you started dating?
How we first met. Okay, well, TGI Fridays had opened a restaurant in Port of Spain, and it had become quite the place to go. So they decided to open a second restaurant in the central part of the country, a town called Chaguanas. So I decided, a couple of friends, we went to go check out this new restaurant, and I walked in, looked across the room, and there was your mom sitting at one of the tables. So
How old were you?
I must have been in my 20s.
31.
Okay. So you met Mom after you'd gotten the job in Canada?
Sarita,
Huh?
did I have a job already?
Or sorry, after you had started working, or didn't you say that?
Yes.
Right. So then, were you and Mom always like? Did you ever spend some time long distance, or did she move up with you?
So when I met her, I had the job lined up, but I hadn't started working yet, so I was unemployed. And your mom was working and had a company car, so that worked out quite well. At the end of the year, I started back in Windsor, and yeah, we did a long distance relationship for a year until your mom came up to do her university in London.
Wow. Was that year hard for you? Do you think?
It was hard. It was hard being apart, for sure. It was hard leaving, but what made it a bit easier was so busy getting settled in Windsor and getting acclimatized that, you know, it seemed to fly by.
Right. Okay. Well, now we're on the topic of Mom. So Mom moved up to join you a year later, and you guys have been here together for, well, a while now. How do you think your experience here was different from Mom's? You know, as an immigrant, as a healthcare professional, maybe versus Mom.
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder if it was a little bit easier for me because I started off I was younger, I was 19, and it was university. So a lot of people were moving out of home for the first time. We're all kind of in the same kind of position, finding our way on our own and kind of bonding over that. So when your mom came up, though, she did her undergraduate in Trinidad and she came up for her master's. Whereas, you know, probably a lot of people were already more set in their ways. So I wonder if that would have been a more difficult transition for her.
Interesting.
But I have to say though, whenever somebody's coming here for school, I think it's always a little bit easier
Right.
than somebody who's coming, you know, not having the backing of a school and your school friends, the people you're going to meet in that school to kind of help you through the process.
Do you think that Canada's view of immigrants and like just immigration in general, do you think it has changed a lot within however long you've lived here?
Absolutely. I still think that when I came up, yes, it was university, but in general, even outside of university, people seemed more accepting, more curious. Not a lot of people knew, I remember back then, not a lot of people knew where Trinidad was. But they were interested to learn more about it and where it was, and we would talk about calypso and steel pan, and yeah, it was a very welcoming kind of environment. I remember the second place I lived was a high-rise apartment building, and the couple next to me, they were a bit older, and I remember the lady there, she was friendly, always smiling, and then at the end of it, when I was moving out, she wrote a letter to my parents telling them what what a good neighbor I had been.
That's so sweet. So you think it would have been maybe more difficult now? Do you think even with, I know you said it was harder for you to find people that related to you in that way, you know, being an immigrant. Do you think even with that, even with more like information and more like accessibility to different like kinds of groups and kinds of people, do you think even with that it's still more difficult?
I don't know if it was that difficult not having people of a similar background in terms of nationality, because I think in university we were kind of all united by the fact that we were still, this was our first year out of our parents' homes for most of us, living on our own and trying to figure that whole thing out. For a lot of us, it was the first time we had a roommate.
Mom! Okay.
And I think back then, I looked at the folks around me as other 19-year-olds and other 20-year-olds. And I don't think there was as much of a difference that was apparent. Yeah, at times I would miss things that were kind of Trinidadian, the food, the cuisine, the music, and you would kind of yearn to hang out with people from your country a little bit. But I don't think that was a day-to-day thing. And luckily in McMaster there was the International Club, and you could meet other international people. But at the end of the day, I think you would end up hanging out with the people in your class who were doing the same subjects as you, or other West Indians.
Right. So do you think, this is a question that I did not put, this is a new one that I just kind of came up with. Do you think that, you know, there's, I would say, you know, okay, how am I trying to say this? Like, so we are Trinidadian, right? So we're not exactly Indian. And do you think that growing up, there's probably going to be a couple more Indian immigrants that are of the same, you know, national, like race, religion? Did you find yourself ever like sort of being drawn to them, or were they like, because they weren't West Indian or Trinidadian, do you think they didn't feel the same ways about certain things that you did?
Right.
Do you think that, or do you think that's
Right. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. That's an interesting point. When I was growing up in Trinidad, there were two major demographics. There were people of East Indian descent and there were people of African descent. Together, those two demographics probably made up about 90 to 95% of the population. So I kind of grew up thinking that I was Indian.
Right.
Our families were in Trinidad for five generations or so. And they had kept their culture, and for the most part, that's what I thought I was. I was Indian. So I moved to Hamilton, and I remember Rish was his name. He comes up to me, says hi, because we look very similar. But Rish is from India, I'm from Trinidad, and we start talking, and that's when we realized. That's when I realized that we kind of look the same. We're genetically identical, probably, but his culture was completely different from mine, and it was a realization, and. That's just on the superficial nature, right? We ended up becoming good friends because, we were in a lot of the same classes and we shared a lot of the same ideas.
Very interesting. Who do you think, throughout your adulthood and your time post-secondary, who do you think helped you through it the most?
Post-secondary? So university.
Sorry, my bad. I meant post-university.
After university. And that would have to be probably your mom.
What? How do you think she's helped you?
We can talk about different phases in your life when you're when you're a child and in your preteen years. It'd be your parents, right? Definitely. My parents kind of supported me and helped me through those times. Then as a teen, you end up doing a lot more stuff on your own, but still, whenever you're stuck, the person you would go to would be your parents, right? So as a teen, 90% of the time I'd be doing my own thing, making my own decisions until either A, got into trouble or B, had a problem I couldn't solve, and it would still be the people you rely on would be still your parents at that point. Then I move away to Canada and I go to university, and in university your lecturers are way at the front of the lecture hall, and you don't really get to know them like really well. Your backup at that point would be, for me, it would have been a couple other West Indians. They were older than I was. They were a couple of years ahead of me, but they had been in Canada longer, kind of knew their way around. So if I couldn't figure out something, they would usually be the ones to kind of point me in the right direction. After that, once you start working, post-university, you start working, there's always going to be somebody who's been doing it longer than you. And some people identify one person kind of as their mentor. For me, it's been, I've had a couple of people over the years that if I was stuck, I knew I could go to, and they can help point me in the right direction.
All right, well, I'm almost done with you. I have one more question to ask you.
Sure.
And that is, what is one memorable or funny story or something that happened? It can be from your childhood, or it can be from pretty much any time throughout your life, but just like the most memorable story that you remember.
That's excuse me, that's a pretty broad stroke.
Yeah, but I'm sort of thinking as if someone was to just ask you, just straight off the top of your head, what do you think is like the thing that you remember the most from your childhood? What would that be for you?
From my childhood.
Yes, let's go from childhood then.
From my childhood, I remember you get your license, your learner's permit when you're 17 in Trinidad, a year after you do here. And I must have been probably about 13 when my dad comes home and says, "It's time you learn how to drive." So he had brought home one of the smaller company cars called a Mitsubishi Lancer, which you could put the seat up far enough, and then you could still, as a 13-year-old, still hit the brake pedal and the accelerator, and puts me behind. He shows me the clutch and the brake and the accelerator, and then he goes, "Okay, let's go for a spin." And there was this subdivision that was being built, and there was a cul-de-sac. It was a loop, more than a cul-de-sac, like a loop, but there were no houses on there yet, and it was just a gravel road. And then he says, "Okay, you can drive as fast as you want, just don't run off the road." So we did that, and it was kind of fun. And then he says, "Okay, I just have to do an errand. Let's go to this other neighborhood, still in just next door to where we live." And we drive, and we pull up to this guy's house, and he's talking to him, and the guy's a cop, and I'm in the driver's seat.
Did you get in trouble?
No.
Wow. She's
Apparently you don't get in trouble for those things in Trinidad back in the 70s or 80s it would have been.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to interview you.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Okay. Bye-bye.
My name is Darren Gopal, and I'm married. I've been married for 19 years to your mother.
Mm-hmm.
I have two wonderful daughters, ages 16 and 12.
And a son.
And a son. Toby once is applying for the position, but we'll see.
Kind of the same for you.
I was probably closest to your Uncle Bisham, who was the youngest one.
Mm-hmm.
My two older brothers were closer in age, and then there was a bit of a gap, and then I came along. So they were already in high school when I was in primary school and kind of doing their own thing. So probably Uncle Bisham.
Mm.
So 2 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, 5 years of residency, and 1 year of fellowship.
13 years.
Yeah, I think the weather for sure. In Trinidad, it's warm all year round. The temperature varies more between daytime and nighttime than it does between January and the middle of July. We only have 2 seasons, the rainy season and the dry season, and even so, they are not much different. I rented an apartment upstairs at tanning salon. And the guy who was renting the tanning salon, he was kind of my main point of contact for renting the apartment, but he was also renting from the landlord. And he was responsible for paying the electricity bills. And the tanning salon at that time wasn't going too great, so he didn't pay the utility bills. So it was the middle of November when things were kind of starting to get really cold, and the heat shut off. And there was no electricity, no heat for a few nights there, and it was quite tough. Now starts the process to get a work permit for me to come back to be able to actually work in Windsor. But of course, now that I knew I had a job that would eventually, I'll have the paperwork to start working. I could relax a little bit. And that was when I met your mother.
Bing.
How we first met? Okay, well, TGI Fridays had opened a restaurant in Port of Spain, and it had become quite the place to go. So they decided to open a second restaurant in the central part of the country, a town called Chaguanas. So I decided, a couple of friends, we went to go check out this new restaurant, and I walked in, looked across the room, and there was your mom sitting at one of the tables. So